So in previous lecture, as recording has started, let's go through that little bit point. Previous lecture, we were talking about time and space complexity, and this is where we have left off. The last slide was time and space trade-off. Now, just to make this point clear, time and space trade-off, I want to take a very basic example of swapping two numbers. You can swap two numbers using extra variable, third variable, C, let's say. And what you do is you get backup of A, then you update your A with B, and then you update your B with C. And that's one logic of swapping two numbers with extra variable. And then there is one more mathematical way of swapping two numbers. And some of you have posted your answers in the chat box. Yeah, as Nisha says, A equals to A plus B, B equals to A minus B, A equals to A minus B. Yeah, that's correct one, Nisha. You go through this mathematical process and you will have two numbers swapped, and that is also correct. Now here we do not go for any extra variable. We haven't taken any extra variable C here. But in that case, what we need to do is, instead of simply assigning values from one to another, we need to go for extra mathematical process also, addition and subtraction, right? So that's what we need to do. Now, considering these two examples, with extra variable, you go for only assignment, which means if you take extra memory, then you go for simple assignment operations, which is quick. So it takes less time, but it takes more space, more memory. Extra variable is required. So that takes extra memory, but it takes less time. Whereas in the second example, if we do not take extra variable, which means it takes less memory, extra variable की जरूरत नहीं पड़ी यहाँ पे, तो मैंने memory कम कर ली. But in that case, I need to go for mathematical operations. एक addition और दो subtraction operation मुझे ज़्यादा करने पड़े, and that takes time. So if I reduce my memory, then I need to increase time to execute my process. And if I increase my memory, then I might decrease the execution time, right? So with this example, now you will be in a position to understand this time-space trade-off. There are multiple ways to solve your task, to solve your problem, but all those different algorithms or ways, you'll find there is always a time and space trade-off. Someone will take much time, less space, whereas other one will take less time, but it will take more space. And this trade-off will always be there. As a programmer, we need to decide which algorithm or what time or a space I'm going to decrease based on my requirement. So that is the time and space trade-off. Now, expression, how do we express time and space complexity? So till now we were discussing that whatever algorithm we have, we are going to find out the time complexity and space complexity. Time complexity is what? It's a total time required by algorithm or any task or a process. Now, but when we say time required by algorithm, it is not in terms of seconds, minutes, or hours. We specify that time in terms of the input size. And same is space complexity. When we say we want to calculate space complexity, then space, it's a required space by your algorithm. Again, it is not in terms of bytes, bits, kilobytes, megabytes or so. No, it will be again in terms of input size. And space depends on constant memory size and variable memory size. We have already gone through. Constant memory size is the number of variables and constants and all those, whereas variable memory will be based on the recursion, dynamic memory allocation, and so on, right? So that's what the time and space complexity is. But how do we express? We have seen that we are going to have a function f of n, which is in terms where n is actually the input size. So n is what? N is the input size. Now, why do we require this time and space complexity in terms of this function and input size? So there might be a case where when we want to predict the rate of growth of your algorithm. Now, what do you mean by rate of growth of an algorithm? So algorithm is a process which is going to solve your problem, and that's the generic process which is going to solve your problem with any input number or size or whatever. So if you want to predict, let's say you have a sorting algorithm. You have an algorithm which is going to sort your list of numbers. Now you want to predict that what happens if you give 10 numbers to that algorithm, and what happens if you give 10,000 numbers to that algorithm. And also, let's say, what happens if you give 1 lakh numbers to the same algorithm, how it performs. So what we need is, we want to check with different number of input sizes how my algorithm works. So to predict that, we need this kind of analysis, complexity analysis. That's one thing. Another thing, let's say you do have number of algorithms to solve your problem, and you want to find out which one is the best one, which is the most efficient algorithm for your problem. So in that case also, you go for time and space complexity analysis part. So that's the requirement of doing this thing. So when we do that, and whatever founding we have, we are going to represent it with some notation, right? Some notations. And those notations are nothing but the big O notation that is widely used. So whatever function you found, f of n, you are going to represent that function f of n in some notations. One notation is big O notation. So there is big O notation, O notation, theta notation, omega notation, and big omega notation. Now we are going to see all these notations in later semester, when you will have a separate subject on this thing, analysis of algorithm. Okay, right now here in this semester, you just need to be aware of, there is a big O notation, and that is actually the upper bound of your algorithm complexity, upper bound. So it's kind of a worst case analysis. વધારેમાં વધારે આટલો ટાઈમ લેશે, આનાથી માથે તો કોઈ હિસાબે નહીં જાય, એવી રીતે યાદ રાખો, right? So let me clarify. Big O notation is actually the upper bound of your algorithm. In worst case, your algorithm will take this much time or this much space. That is what represented by big O. It is read by O, big O notation, and the later is capital O. So that is big O notation, which is upper bound. In worst case, your algorithm will take this much time or this much space. Now this is a notation, which means the same notation we can use for time complexity as well as space complexity. It's just a notation. Now we need to be sure that this given function is for time or space, right? So let's say I know that big O notation is there to represent my time or a space complexity, and and that complexity will be in terms of input size, which is function f of n. But how do I calculate that function? How do I define that function? That's what the next question comes to our mind. So now let's go through that process, defining time complexity for algorithms. So we are actually going to define a function f of n now. And we will be focusing on time complexity only. Okay. So let's say if a function, or the function means the algorithm is given to you here, a function given, or let's say the algorithm is given to you, then it is a step-by-step process to solve your task. Now, if that process is a linear process, so there are finite number of steps, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on. And then one more thing, if there is no iteration, loop, recursion kind of thing. So if you say that your algorithm is a linear one, then running time for that linear process will be finite, and we say the number of steps will be the number of will be the time required. Simple. If there are 11 steps in your algorithm, then that 11 steps are the required time for your algorithm to be done. So if it is linear one, then it is very simple. But and we can say it's a constant time. Then the number of steps will be the time required. That's it. So when we do have a problem, we say that when we have loop kind of thing, iteration, recursion or something, then we say that there is a problem, and then we need to be more focused. How do we calculate that thing? Just a minute. Sorry. So we say when we have a loop kind of thing, then we need to be more focused. How do we calculate how many times that statement is being executed, right? So if it is a linear loop, then again that's the simplest one. So if it is only one loop, linear loop, and starting from 0 up to 100 with one increment, then we say, okay, this statement is going to be executed for 0 to 100, so total 100 times. So here loop factor is 100, okay, and this statement is going to be executed 100 times. So that 100 times, it's a time required to execute this block. Now when we say we are going for generalization, then we say that if input is n, instead of this 100, we say input is n, then n number of times this statement is going to be executed. And that's why we say it's the function f of n equals to n. N is the input size. Now we can say that, okay, it's a linear loop, but increment factor is not 1. You increase your I by 2 here, but your input size is fixed, 100. So 0 to 100, but I will be incremented by 2. Then the number of times this statement is going to be executed will be half than this one. So it becomes half. And in that case, we say function f of n will be n by 2. So is this clear? How many times your statement within the function is being executed? Is this clear to all? Yeah, I believe it is. It will be clear. Just to verify that everyone is on the same page. So what we do is we just find out how many times this statement is going to be executed. That is the required time. So if my input is n, then it is going to be executed n times. So function will be n. If my input is n, it is a linear loop, but increment factor is double, then the number of time this block or this statement is going to be executed will be the half, so n by 2. So that's linear loop. Now let's say you have a nested loops, one loop, and inside that you have another loop. So there are nested loops. So inner loop is going to be executed how many times? The number of times outer loop will be executed. So the inner loop execution time multiplied by outer loop execution time will give you the total execution time. Let's take one example here. So if this is the example, you have outer loop of I 0 to 10, then you have inner loop of j 0 to 10, and then you have the executable statements. Now in this case, we need to find out how many times this statement is being executed. So this statement is going to be executed 0 to 10, j plus plus. So 10 times this will be executed for loop of j. But this loop of j in turn will be executed for I equals to 0 to 10. So 10 times outer loop is also being run. So 10 multiplied by 10, it is 100. And it is actually 10 raised to 2. So now if we say my input size is n, so 0 to n, 0 to n, then it becomes n square. So function is n square here. So linear loop, f of n will be simple n. Quadratic loop, nested loop, you will have f of n equals to n square. Right? This is a quadratic loop, but these two loops are independent. But what if these two loops are dependent to each other? So outer loop I equals to 0 to 10, inner loop j equals to 0 to I, which means inner loop is dependent on the outer loop. Increment factor is 1 in both the cases, so that's not a problem. But now we need to be focused here. J is being run from 0 to I, and which means j is dependent on I. Now just to understand, if your I is 0, then j equals to 0 up to 0. Only one time your inner loop will be executed. Then you say if your I is equals to 1, then j starting from 0 up to 1, which means 2 times your inner loop will be executed. Then when your I becomes 2, then j equals to 0 to 2, 3 times. So 3 times your loop will be executed, and so on up to 10 times. So total process is 55 times this statement is going to be executed for this example. For this given example, this statement block will be executed 55 times. Now we want to go for generalization. What if input size is n? 10 ના બદલે n કહી દઈએ તો આ કઈ રીતે કેલ્ક્યુલેશન થશે? Now એના માટે તમે સિમ્પલી એમ કહી શકો 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 up to n. So it's n plus 1 by 2. That's one way. Or in other way, if we want to go for, then what is the average time for this statement to be executed? Here it is 55, so average is 5.5, which is actually n plus 1 by 2. So this is n plus 1 by 2 is the inner loop is going to be run. Now that many times outer loop is going to run also. So outer loop from 0 to n. So outer loop n and inner loop n plus 1 by 2. So total will be n plus 1 by 2. So in both the ways you can understand this process. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus up to n will directly have mathematical equation n plus 1 by 2. Or in other words, if you want to go for the same equation, inner loop execution multiplied by outer loop execution equals to total execution. Then inner loop execution is n plus 1 by 2 here. Outer loop execution is n here. So total is n plus 1 by 2. So that's a quadratic loop which is dependent. And this is your function, f of n equals to n plus 1 by 2. So this is how we found we calculate, we devise, we define f of n function. And this f of n is going to be your time or space complexity. If you are calculating execution steps, then it is time complexity. If you are calculating memory space, then it will be space complexity, and so on. Right? So now that's a function. Now how do we define notation, big O notation? Then it is simply the order of, this is how we read actually. Big O notation is going to be read by order of n square. Order of n square, or we can say order of what is it, 1 lakh n square. That's how we read. But when we say big O notation, it is just the upper bound, and it is only focusing on the growth rate. Okay, let me again speak this statement. Big O notation is the upper bound, and it is only focused on the growth rate. Now, when you say growth rate, it depends on the input n. It depends on input n. So this big O will purely depend on n. When you multiply a constant, any constant number to that n, that actually doesn't matter. In real world, it does have the impact on a runtime. Okay, but when we just want to go for the growth rate analysis, then we say this constant multiplication part is not going to affect my growth rate. So big O of n square and big O of 1 lakh n square, both these are going to be equal for big O notation. Both these are going to be equal in big O notation, because here we just want to focus on the growth rate, and growth is dependent on n, not on 1 lakh. It depends on n only, right? So that is one limitation of big O notation. In real world, 1 lakh multiplication is going to matter, but when we are focusing on growth rate only, then it does not matter. And this is the big O notation. In this semester, you only have the introduction part for complexity analysis. In further semester 5, you might be having entire subject on this complexity analysis, algorithm analysis part. And in that subject, you are going to learn these topics very deeply. So, but till now, any question from your side? If you have any doubt related to this introduction part that we have gone through, you can ask right now. Anything that you want to ask? Do you have any query or question? I'm waiting for your reply. At least yes, no, or something. Well, thank you, Kevin. Yeah, Khushi, yes, and all. Okay, then. So that was the end of our unit number 1, Introduction to Data Structures. Now, next step is the second unit. We want to start right now, actually. And the second unit is linear data structures and their representation. As I said, second unit will totally focus on linear data structures only. Non-linear data structures we will see in the third unit, right? So let me have the presentation slide of second unit now. Yeah, I hope that you can see the second unit presentation now. So this second unit is, sorry, I forgot to change the subject code here, but this is Marwari University subject code. Your subject code is different than this one. So it contains 4 major linear data structures, which is array, stack, queue, and a linked list. We'll start with array, and in array, we are going to see the representation of arrays, 1 dimension, 2 dimension, then how arrays are being stored, applications of array, few operations on array, how to use those arrays, and sparse matrix also, sparse matrix and its representation. So that's what the content of array topic we are going to cover. This is kind of a revision for your first semesters, first year. Even we have seen array in your lab 1, first lab last week that we have covered. We've also gone through array examples in that lab session. So we will quickly go through array part. What is array? Array is a collection or a group of the elements having same data type, right? Whenever you want to declare your array, you need to have a name, array name, variable name, and a size. And if you want to refer an element, then you again need array name, variable name, and the position of your element. And that is going to be the index of your element, right? That's what we want. Whenever we declare array, it's a fixed size array, so it is a static one. And we need to be, we need to be defined that how many elements your array is going to have at the time of declaration itself. This is how your array will be represented. If you say it's integer array of 5 elements and the variable name is marks, then it is going to have 5 elements. Indexes will be from 0 to 4, and elements you can access like marks of 0, marks of 1, marks of 2, and so on. These are the elements, and whatever these blocks you are looking at right now are nothing but the memory blocks in a consecutive memory allocation. Whatever element you want to access, then you can access that element by having variable name and then offset or the index value. So C of 0, C is your array and 0 is the index, then it is nothing but a simple variable kind of thing. You can assign value, you can print value. Even this square bracket defining indexes can have operations inside it. So 5 minus 2 in a square bracket will be operated first, which becomes 3, and it is equals to C of 3. Even you can have your variable as a subscript in your square bracket also. That's also allowed. So whenever we declare array, we have name, we have type, data type, we have number of elements, and this need to be there. You can declare multiple arrays in the same line if it is of same data type. Then whenever you want to assign values in array, then you can assign those values by using curly bracket, and all the values are separated by comma. We have seen these examples in lab session. And if you want to assign all the elements to the same value 0, then n of 5 equals to write 0 only once. Then it is going to assign 0 to all 5 elements. Okay. Now when you initialize your array at the time of declaration, then you can omit your size. That's also possible. If you want to pass your array to a function, okay, then you just need to write array name, variable name in a function. So my function and my array, that is just a variable name. Need not to define any square bracket here. But when you do this, it is going to pass the 0th element address always. Variable array variable name, only writing array variable name is actually the address of 0th element, and that's why it is called by reference always. And when you pass your array to a function, then on the other hand, on the other side, your function need to have that array variable. So int b and square bracket. So whenever you pass array, that array is going to be addressed by this variable b. Now if this is just a prototype declaration, then you can omit this b. You can only write int square bracket. So that's how we pass array to a function. So that's the very basic quick revision part of declaration, assignment, accessing elements of arrays. And we have looked at one-dimensional array till now. That's it. Now we want to see operations on array. Now, before starting these operations, I'll have a pause here. Just have a 1-minute pause. Quickly recall whatever we have done till now in this lecture and try to digest that part. And during that time, if you want to ask me anything, you can. Look, these points are very basic ones, and that's why I'm going very quickly, because I want to spare this time for upcoming topics which are new for you. So any queries or questions you want to ask? Okay. Let's go on then. Let us move on. And yeah, there's one question. What is the difference between call by value and call by reference? Yeah, Khushi, that is our first practical also. If you have attended first lab, last week lab, then this is where we stop our discussion. We pass two values in a function and we swap it, but that swap operation does not affect my original data, and that's because of call by value. Now in this week, in your second lab, we are going to discuss that what is call by value and call by reference, and we will have one example there. First practical is purely based on call by value and call by reference. Okay, so your question will be cleared in lab session. Okay, so let's move on, and we want to have a look at these array operations now. Okay, traversal. So you simply want to traverse your array. You want to visit all your elements. And once you traverse, you can do anything that you want. You can print it, you can compare those numbers, you can count those numbers, you can find out average, whatever you want. So that's the traversal process. Once you know the traversal process, you'll also know the searching process. Okay, and then the other three operations are something where we want to insert a new value, or we want to delete the existing value, or let's say we want to merge two arrays. So these are very basic operations on arrays, and we'll look at those one by one. So the first one is what we want to, let's say, traverse our array. Now when we say we want to traverse, we want to visit each and every element. Once we visit it, then we can print those elements, we can count those elements, or we can do any process on those elements, whatever we want. So that's what the traversal process is. Now how do we do that? So it's very simple. You start your iterator I from your lower bound, and you repeat your process. So we repeat number of steps until I is reach up to the upper bound. So I, or iterator, is less than or equals to upper bound. We are going to repeat the process. Now what process we do? So for that iterator I, it is actually referring to the ith element. So a of itr, a of I, that's the element we have, and we can do any process with that element. And once we are done with that process, we update our iterator I equals to I plus 1, and then we do this process iteratively. So when I say I want to apply a process, if you want to print it, then do printf here. If you want to count the number of elements, then you can have counter and cnt plus plus here. So whatever you want, you can do that process at this place, step number 3. And this is simple traversal of entire array. एक loop ले लो, I equals to lower bound थी, I equals to upper bound સુધી તમારી loop ચાલે. That is traversal process. Now there is one exercise here, but we won't spend much time here. You can have a screenshot of this slide right now. Just quickly take a screenshot, and whenever you have a time, you do this exercise. This exercise says that there is an one-dimensional array marks, okay, marks, one-dimensional array, to store the marks of your of student, let's say. And when you use index values, you can have, let's say, marks of 4 equals to 78. This is how you can access your elements, right? So let's say this index number is a roll number of student. So if you have 60 students in a class, then this marks array need to be of size 60. And the value of that element is a mark, total marks obtained by that student. Okay. Now that's what the setup you have been given already. Now you need to perform these two tasks. Need to find out total number of students who have secured 80 or more marks. So need to traverse the entire array, and when you are processing element, you actually need to have if-else condition and then counter. So that's one thing. Second process is print all roll numbers, which means you need to print this iterator I index, roll numbers, and along with that marks of all students who have got distinction. So whoever is having 80 or 85%, more than 80 or 85%, then you are going to print it. Otherwise, you are going to simply skip that thing. So this is the exercise. I want you to do this whenever you have a time, at your time, at your place. We are not going to do it right now in this lecture. Do it, and if you face any problem, we can discuss this thing in a lab session. So that's traversal. Next is searching. We want to search a particular element or the value or the number within an array. Now, when we want to search a particular number, then there are two different ways: linear search and binary search. Now, in your unit number 5, you are going to learn both these algorithms: linear search algorithm and binary search algorithm. And at that point of time, unit number 5, you will learn both these methods. Now, when we have two different ways to go for performing a task, then there will always be a question, which one is a better one? Then the answer will always depend on the values, what values you do have. Okay, so in detail, we will see both these algorithms, pros and cons of both these algorithms in unit number 5. Okay, so that's searching. Now we want to see the insertion operation. Let's say you are already given an array of 5 elements where you do have 3 values already stored: 11, 12, 13. And let's say you want to add 20 to this array. We want to add 20. Now, if I simply say that add 20, then next question from your side will be, sir, where do we need to add it? આ 20 ને મારે ક્યાં એડ કરવાના, તમે એમ પૂછશો. So if you want to add new number at the end, अगर last में ही add करना है, then you will check whether there is empty space at the end or not. अगर last में empty space available है, then what you are going to do is you simply assign that value to that upper bound. That's it, and you are done. And if your array is already full, then it is not possible to add new number there, right? So adding a new number at the end is very much simple. You simply increase your upper bound, and then wherever your upper bound is pointing to, you store your value, and you are done. Very simple process. Increase your upper bound, then store your value at the upper bound place, and you are done. So this is very simple to add new number at the end. But now, what if you want to insert a number in between somewhere the existing values? Then we need to be looking at, let's say A is the given array, capital N is the upper bound, then POS is the position where you want to insert a new value, and value is given here. That's what the naming conventions we do follow here. So let's have a look at the process. A is a array given to you. Upper bound is 4, which means there are 4 values. Okay. Then on a second position, you want to insert, so position 1 and position 2. At this place, you want to insert new value 15. Okay, 15 you want to insert here. But if you want to insert 15 here, then what you need to do is you need to shift all these existing values to the right side. That's what the process we need to do actually. Otherwise, we won't be able to insert a new value anywhere in between. So what we do is we actually start from the last value and we shift it to the right side. So 14 is shifted on the right side, and we have space here. Then what we do is we shift 19 to the right side, and we have space here. Then we shift 17 on the right side and we make space here. So we actually wanted to make a space, empty space, to accommodate 15. 15 ને એડ કરવા માટે અહીંયા એક સ્પેસ બનાવવી હતી આપણે, અને સ્પેસ બનાવવા માટે આપણે શું કરીએ, એક્ઝિસ્ટિંગ વેલ્યુને રાઈટ સાઈડ શિફ્ટ કરીએ. This is what the process we need to go through. Then we can add 15 there. We can add 15 here. So this process we need to do. So we have started shifting the last number to the right side, last number which is upper bound. So we have started from upper bound and we reach up to the required position. So 4 થી 2 સુધી આપણે બધાને shift કરતા જાશું. So this is the algorithm for that process. You start your iteration from the upper bound n, okay, and you iterate, means your I will go through up to the given position. So I is greater equals to POS, I minus minus. Now every time what we will do is we are going to shift ith value to the right side, which is I plus 1. We are going to store ith value to I plus 1 position. And this iteration is going to shift all those numbers. Once we are done with this shifting process, we can insert a new value at given position. Okay, and we are done. But remember, you have inserted new value, so your upper bound must be updated. So that's the reason we are going to update our n also, and that is the insertion process. Okay, insert a new value somewhere in between or at a given place, given position. Then next is the deletion process. Delete an existing value from your entire array. Let's say you have been given this array of 5 elements, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 is the value, and you want to delete 13. Look, if you just want to delete the last value, then it is very much simple. You delete that value, and if there is nothing on after that value, then you are done. But if you delete a value somewhere in between, then like we do shifting process in insertion, we also need to do those shifting operations in deletion part also. So deleting an element from the end is just you decrease your upper bound. एक value ओछी देगी तो upper bound घटी जासा. That's it. But deleting a value from middle, we need to go through the shifting process. So let's say this array A is given to you, which is having upper bound 5, which means there are 5 values, and you want to delete a second value. Okay, now in that case what you do is you simply delete that second position value. So we have deleted that value here, but once we delete that value, we have empty space there, and in that case we need to shift all the numbers which are after that to the left side. So we shift 19 on the left side, then we shift 14 on the left side, then we shift 16 on the left side, and then we are done. Okay, then we are done. So what process we actually do, we delete the given position value, but actually we need not to write anything for deleting it. We can simply start shifting the values. So 19 is going to overwrite 17 here, and so on. So 19, 14, 16, and so on. So starting from the given position plus 1, starting from that, we go up to upper bound, and that's the process we need to do here. So how do we do that? Whatever position is given to you, start from it, and you go up to upper bound minus 1. And from the next place, I plus 1 place से आप value उठा के ith place पे रख दो. So we are going to shift those values and I++. Once we are done with this entire shifting process, we have actually deleted one value, so we need to decrease our upper bound. So n equals to n minus 1 and exit. So this is very much simple deletion operation in array. So we have seen traversal, searching, insertion and deletion operation. Searching operation actually unit 5 માં આવશે. અત્યારે આપણે ડિટેલ નથી જોઈ. We have seen traversal, insertion and deletion. Any query or question till now? We'll stop here. We will see merging process in next lecture. So that's all for today. Now we do have a few minutes left. Let us solve queries of yours. If you do have any query, we can go through it. Any query or question? Yeah, Horst is asking in insertion line number 6a pose -1. Let me go to insert algorithm. Okay, and here you are saying that I equals to n, then ith value we are going to shift right side, right side up to I equals to pose સુધી. So second position, look, this is an algorithm, okay? Just a minute. This is an algorithm. So algorithm will never say that index starting from 0. Most of the time algorithm will work as positions 1 2 3 4, and in program we work with indexes, and at that time we think from 0 1 2 3 4 and so on. So that's what you need to be careful of. So a of pose equals to 1, given position જે position આપી છે ત્યાં જ value ને store કરવી પડશે, એટલે value ને હું a of pose માં જ નાખીશ, and this is the algorithm. So a of pose will work. અહીંયા જો index ની જેમ જવું હોય, pose -1 લખવું હોય, તો યાદ રાખો આ આખી પ્રોસેસ 0 બેઝ લઈ જવી પડશે. તો એમાં પછી અપર બાઉન્ડ n ની હોય, અપર બાઉન્ડ n-1 થઈ જશે. પછી આ i ની લૂપ greater equals to position સુધી ની, greater than position સુધી ચાલશે, and so on, right? So just hers, remember algorithms can have base 1, programs will have base 0. Okay, so that's okay. You can write a of pose, you can write a of pose -1, but if you are writing a of pose -1, then your entire algorithm should be based on that. Am I clear now? Now later on, when we will see other algorithms on stack, queue, linked list, tree, graph and so on, we will be writing those algorithms on a 0 base. જસ્ટ એટલા માટે કે તમે જ્યારે એ અલ્ગોરિધમનો યુઝ કરીને પ્રોગ્રામ બનાવો તો કન્ફ્યુઝ ન થાઓ, એટલે આગળના સ્ટેકથી લઈને આગળના બધા જ અલ્ગોરિધમ આપણે 0 બેઝ લખશું. અત્યારે જે અલ્ગોરિધમ તમારી સામે છે એ 1 બેઝ છે. Any other questions? Fine, then let's conclude now. Let's conclude here. So thank you for joining this session. Hope to see you in the next one. Thank you. You may leave now.